Hello everyone and welcome back. Just sitting down to do a little video about reskinning. So what is reskinning? Reskinning is basically, it's just a tool that the Dungeon Master can use to make the game a little easier for him to manage and can make it a little more fun for the players. It's pretty handy. I'm going to talk about 3 different instances of reskinning right now. We're going to reskin a monster, we're going to reskin some items, and we're going to reskin the player characters. So let's talk about, let's pick a situation where we could reskin a monster. Here's one that's actually fairly useful. So we have here a zombie. Zombies are great monsters, but if we look up what the zombies' statistics are, we'll go here to the monster manual that's built into Roll20 and scroll down to the bottom. Obviously the zombie's there, and let's take a look at the zombie. Yeah, so you can see his hit point, armor class is up here, and down here we have his challenge rating, and the zombie is a CR 1/4. That is a weak enemy, so that is not particularly strong, and so what's going to happen is that very quickly the zombie is going to stop being a useful thing to send against your players, because by the time they reach level 3 or 4, it's going to take 20 of them to make for an interesting challenge. And while you could still do something like that, it might become a little difficult to manage as the DM. For most monsters, there's usually a slightly more powerful version of it. So off the top of my head, for zombies, I can tell you there are things like ghouls and gas bites, like this guy over here, and that's a challenge rating of 3. But at the same time, you might want to use a monster that maybe doesn't have an exact analog. So what you can do is, reskinning is a way to basically take another monster and just change its name and appearance so that it looks like the one that you wanted. And so yeah, even though we have more powerful versions of the zombie, let's just use it as a generic and see if we can find something that's close to sort of close to a zombie in fighting style, but a little stronger. So we're going to filter results, and we're going to filter by, let's say we have a party of level 5 or 6 players and they want to fight maybe 4 or 5 enemies. So that'd be estimating around a challenge rating of 2. So just doing this off the top of my head, let's scroll through CR2 and see if there's something a little similar to. So there's something like an ogre zombie maybe, but let's look at something a little bit more different. So something a little more different that you might not think about might be something like a polar bear. So let's pull the polar bear onto the screen. As you can see, pretty generic for the most part. Got the same kind of attacks that a zombie might have, but it's much stronger. And so this is a pretty good candidate for reskinning as a zombie. Alright, so to get started on that, what you want to do is go into the editor, and so you can come up with a creative name for what you might want to call your new zombie, maybe like a walking wretch or just like a walker. Anything really that you come up with, you can put over here. For now, for the tutorial, I'm just going to put in giant zombie. Okay. And so now we're in here in the character sheet, and so the reason that we're not just going into, for example, this is the regular zombies character sheet that I'm popping up right now, or I'm trying to pop up right now. Okay, here it is. So why aren't we just increasing the zombie's armor class, or increasing the zombie's hit points, speed, strength, any of its other statistics? Why aren't we just adjusting this stuff? The reason we're not just arbitrarily making its abilities more powerful is because then we have to determine how many experience points the group's going to get. And yes, if you open up the monster manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide, there is plenty of material to help you determine how to adjust experience points based on a monster's armor class, hit points, strength, etc. But that's a little time consuming, and you don't necessarily need to do that. I find this method to just be much easier. So let's take and it's a lot faster too. So let's take a look at this. We got the giant zombie here. We're just going to go through its various abilities, and we're just going to change them. See? Giant zombie. So now the name of this character sheet has been changed to Giant Zombie. The next thing we're going to do, we're just going to adjust some of its parameters. I would recommend you change as little as possible, because the more you change, the less it's going to reflect the change in experience points that you're going to get. I would highly recommend you reconsider making anything stronger, because if you make anything stronger, like if you increase the AC or the hit points, you're going to shortchange your characters on the experience points they're going to get. I personally don't have a problem making anything weaker, because it's not going to be a huge difference in experience points, and if it's going to go in such a way that the players get a little bit more than they normally would, I don't care. I think that's perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with that. So we're going to change it from a beast to undead. And again, that doesn't change much except how it maybe interacts with some abilities. We're going to leave its armor class and hit points alone. We're going to adjust its speed, because that's maybe a little fast for zombies. Zombies are typically around 20 feet, and this guy's around 40. But we're going to just make him a relatively fast zombie at around 30 feet. So we're not really changing it too much. We don't need to worry about the experience going wildly out of the way. And then, so the polar bear has a swim speed of 30 feet. Generally speaking, the zombies don't swim. You can leave this in, you can get rid of this. It's not a big deal. Or you can say for some reason this zombie knows how to swim. I'm going to leave all these stats the same except for maybe wisdom. I'm going to take wisdom down to 8. Okay. And if you wanted to even it out, you can increase intelligence maybe, but I would tend to just leave it at that. We'll just make the creature a little bit weaker. Like I said, that's generally the direction you want to go with reskinning. Down here you can see things like damage vulnerabilities, damage resistances, damage immunities. You can change these things if you want, but again, I'm going to recommend you change as little as possible. So now as you can see, most of the character sheet is looking about right. You can leave stuff like some of these other abilities, or if you want, you can grab an ability from the zombie. Again, for the most part, try not to. Down here you can see under multi-attack, it has the word bear listed. I could go in and change that real quick, but for the most part, you don't actually click the multi-attack button. It just might be a little embarrassing if you click it by accident. And then down here, we're going to leave bite alone, because obviously zombies can do that. For claws, we're going to change that to slam, because that's an attack the zombie has. And we're going to change slashing damage to bludgeoning damage, because that's a damage type for slam attack. And again, we haven't really changed the stats on anything. So for the most part, this is just a polar bear. And so it's giving the exact amount of experience points that a polar bear would give. But as far as the players are going to know, this is just a zombie, and you can make it behave like a zombie in the actual game. So all this stuff is saved. We're going to close that. I'm going to delete this over here, and let's grab a different zombie that we can use for this. So I have one already. I'm just going to slide him into the screen. He's going to be a little big, but we're going to shrink him down. Okay, so I like this guy. And our polar bear is considered a large-sized creature. So whereas a medium-sized creature would be about the same as these zombies, we're going to blow this guy up to a large size like that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to double-click on him. We're going to go over here, and you can either scroll down or just hit the letter S if you know the letter that you're looking for. We're going to look for... Actually, we're looking for G, so let's look for giant zombie. Right towards the bottom. Giant zombie. Alright, so our giant zombie is in there, and then the last thing we want to do is we're going to pull up his character sheet, so now you can see that's attached to him. These are the last two things we're going to want to do. We're going to double click on him. We just want to add his statistics. So he's got hit points of 42, he has a speed of 30, and he has an AC of 12. Save all that. And then the last thing we want to do is we're going to go to edit, and we're going to add this token by clicking on it and select this token. Now this token is associated with this character sheet, and so this is basically our zombie. If we try to pull this from our monster manual, we're always going to get this guy over here, and you can copy paste him to make more like that. And so you can see that's a great way to sort of use the monster that you want to use, regardless as to whether or not it's a good level of difficulty for your players. Let's take a look at items. So here you can see the list of, these are most of the weapons that you can get in Dungeons & Dragons 5.0. And so just reskinning items for the most part, the regular items, they have a decent array of them, but let's say you wanted maybe like a dagger that did, instead of piercing damage, slashing damage. So you could just do that. And you could just basically in the game, you can just, in the player's character sheet, you can just switch piercing to slashing. And so you just have a slightly different type of dagger, and it adds a little bit more flavor and variety to the different items that are available to the players. It doesn't really change anything in the game for the most part. And then the second type of reskinning for items would be something like magical items. So let's take a look at two examples. You have the boots of speed here, which is a wondrous item, and basically it casts haste on the player more or less once a day. Or at least when they take a long rest. And so this isn't really an item that the players should see before level 5. I'm not really going to get into why that is right now, but you can see the tiers of play section in the Dungeon Master's Guide for details on that. But so basically consumable items are okay to give to the players much earlier. So if you wanted to, when you put this item into the game, you could just swap out the section here that says once per day when you finish a long rest, and instead replace it with this item has 4 charges, let's say, and then on the last charge this item disintegrates. Here's the Dagger of Venom, and again it's pretty much the exact same idea. This is an item that poisons when it attacks, and what it is that it has a charge, and then each day at the next dawn the charge returns. And again, you can't really give this to your players before I think around level 5. So if you wanted to give players magical items earlier than that, you just reskin them so that instead of each day at the next dawn, the item just has, let's say, 5 charges, and when the 5th charge is expired, the item disintegrates. So that'll be weapon skinning. The last thing we're talking about is skinning player characters. That's just another great way to add some fun to the game. So a good example of that might be the feat crossbow expert. So the crossbow expert feat basically it gives you 3 things, and what it adds up to basically is one of the main things it does. It makes it so that your character can fire a crossbow rapidly enough that he can fire 2 shots in 1 round. But you might have a player who wants to just basically dual wield crossbows, have a crossbow in either arm, and just be firing crossbows off akimbo like that. But like the rules as written, you can't really allow for that. You need to have an empty hand in order to reload the crossbow. But if you sit down and think about it, and sort of look over the whole situation, you'll realize that there's really no difference. It doesn't give the player any kind of advantage, and just ignoring that tiny rule won't really change the game, other than it might increase the enjoyment for your player that wants to dual wield crossbows. So that's a kind of reskinning for the crossbow expert feat. It's just it just makes the game more fun, makes the player feel cool. It doesn't really change anything detrimentally for the game. Another great example for reskinning a character might be the background, and one of my favorite backgrounds is the charlatan over here. And so when the character takes a charlatan background, what they're saying is basically the character is a liar. He's basically not who he says he is, and while he's not necessarily evil, he's more of a scoundrel type character. And so let's say you have something like a charlatan paladin. So a paladin is a character who has sort of holy magic, holy power that he gains from usually a god or some other entity, or even just from some kind of magic or a promise that he made. So let's say the character takes the charlatan background. What you could say instead is that, okay, he doesn't actually get his power from his righteousness or being good or from a god. He gets his power from, let's say, a magical piece of armor or a magical sword that he picked up one day, and through this item he gets his magical powers. And then the reason why he has to follow his paladin code of conduct is this magical piece of armor or magical weapon is basically preventing him from doing bad or evil, and it sort of makes a story hook. And again, it doesn't actually change the way that the paladin mechanically plays, but can make the game really interesting and fun. And I think that'll be it for reskinning characters and for reskinning in general. All right, thank you very much for watching.